Hi, Carl here for ProAV TV, and today I'm looking at the Canon XF405. Now, I put out a video a couple of weeks ago when this camera was brand new, and I only had about an hour or so to spend with the camera at that time. So that one was very basic, ran through the features, didn't have any chance to shoot with it or anything like that. I've got slightly longer with it this time, and in the comment section of the previous video, you guys had some really great questions. So what I thought I'd do now is I'll just take a little bit longer to play with the camera and go through each one of your questions and answer them for you. Okay, so perhaps the most commonly asked question was, does the XF405 have CLog in it? It doesn't. Unfortunately, it has standard gamma, so EOS standard, as you're used to on some of the other cameras, and it has YDR, which we know from their other cinema lineup. It's an 8-bit camera, which is really designed to shoot what you see is what you get. So you film it, and the way that you film it in camera is how it's delivered. No grading or anything like that, which is of course what CLog is for. Although it does still say that it has quite good dynamic range, about 12-13 stops in YDR. So I've got a shot here of Jonah filming me on the Canon C300 Mark II. So this one is in standard gamma. And then if I cut on that, this one is in YDR. I think the YDR definitely looks better. The skin tones look better, the contrast looks a lot better. You get a lot more dynamic range, but it's still punchy, ready to go straight out of the camera. I personally would definitely keep the camera in YDR mode. And the next most common question that I got asked was about the zoom, both in terms of how far can it zoom and in terms of, is it parfocal? So does it keep focus as it zooms? So John is filming me from the top of a huge hill. Let's roll on this camera so that you can see what I'm seeing. So this is full wide. Now at 1080p, which is what this is filming in right now, it can do the 15 times optical zoom at the lens, and then it can go 15 times further to crop into the 4K image. So if I zoom all the way in now, it can get all the way to there. And it's still in focus. So to get the shot in focus, I zoomed in, focused it, and then zoomed back out again like this, and it seems to still be in focus. So I'd treat this as a parfocal lens. I think there's no problem with that. In terms of how far will it zoom in while it's in 4K, you're probably looking about there, because it's about half of the current zoom range. So that's as far as the optical zoom goes, and then I can go in another twice as far again by cropping into that 4K image. Now, ramping, if I open the lens all the way up, so I'm now all the way right out at f2.8. As I zoom in, it's still at f2.8, 3.2, 3.4, 3.7, 4, f4.4, and 4.8. So it does drop in quite small steps as you go. So if you keep your lens to f4.8, you can zoom like I was doing at the start. There we go, we're now at f4.8, and we can zoom without any drop in exposure. For such a small camera, it's actually got quite a decent zoom range on it if you're in 1080p mode. Okay, so there are a couple of different stabilizer modes in here. We've got stabilizer off, stabilizer on standard, stabilizer on dynamic, and then what's called powered IS. So I'm going to run you through the same shot with each one of them to see what difference they make. So this is off, so this is all the way wide out, and then all the way zoomed in 4K, so this is a 15 times zoom. Quite shaky. And then I'll turn the image stabilizer to standard mode. So this is exactly the same thing, held in exactly the same way, but with the image stabilizer in standard. So this is wide. And this is all the way zoomed in. Okay, this one's called dynamic. So I'm expecting this one to be not quite as good at the still shots, but better when we're walking and things like that. This is wide. And then as I zoom in, this is telephoto. And then we've got a push button on the side of the camera on the LCD screen to turn on powered IS. So this is with powered IS on wide. And then as I zoom in, I think what powered IS does is it tries to emulate a tripod shot. So it will try and keep your shot as still as possible. So there will be some movement every now and again, and it will be a quick movement to try and get it back as still as possible. And then we'll do the same thing with walking. Okay, so rolling shutter is obviously quite an important issue in cameras like this because you're always using them handheld and doing lots of fast movements with them. There's obviously two different types of rolling shutter you need to look out for. One is the jello as you're holding it handheld. Hopefully you'll get a sense of that from my image stabilization test as to whether that bothers you or not. The other one is good old-fashioned vertical lines. And what better way to test that than to do the tripod wiggle test. So I'm just going to do some furious panning left and right with this. And you can be the judge. It seems to handle it fairly well. It certainly seems like it out here in the field on this LCD. Okay, so there seems to be a little bit, but nothing that bothers me too much, to be honest. It seems pretty under control. Okay, so we got a lot of questions about where this fits in Canon's lineup because it's a tiny camera and it's only got one ring for your lens control. And that's always been one of the differentiating factors between professional camcorders like this and semi-professional ones. Semi-professional ones had a small size and one ring like this one does. And then the professional ones were larger lenses, 3 rings to control it. One for your iris, one for your aperture, sorry, iris and aperture, one for zoom and one for focus. This is different, it's smaller, but it still meets the broadcast spec of the top ones. So I think the reason that they've taken some of that, the lens control away, is because it shrinks the camera down, makes it much lighter to use, and you can swap between them really easily. You don't really need to go into focus as much as you did on the old ones because the autofocus performance is so good. So you can control it with the screen with your thumb there and hold the camera here to control your focus. But you can actually access all 3 things just from down here with your thumb. They have thought this through quite well. So there's a little switch here to switch between focus and zoom, and that's what this lens ring at the front will control. And then this little dial down here does your iris. So with keeping your hand in the same place, you can manually focus, you can manually zoom, and you can control your iris all at the same time. In principle, when I first picked up the camera and hadn't used it, I thought that would be a bit annoying. Actually out and about using it, it does actually work quite well. I would obviously prefer to have 3 rings on your lenses, but I think this is a middle ground that works very well. People have been asking, will this compare to the rest of Canon's lineup? So their cinema lineup, the C300, C200, C100, or to the other camcorders below it. The only one I've got with me is the C300, which is filming me right now. There's Gianna, and the C300. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do several shots with both of them, doing the exact same shot with both cameras, to see what the difference. The C300 will be better, of course it will be better, it costs twice as much and it's a very different, more capable camera. But it'll be interesting to see just how close this smaller one gets. This is a bit of a selfish one because I didn't see anyone asking this in the comments down below. This is something that I wanted to know from my original review. But these are the optical screw-on filters that go on the front of these cameras. This one is a telephoto one and it crops in by 1.5 times, and this is a wide angle one which winds it by 0.8 times. Now the question that I had was, does this affect the autofocus performance? In the very, very brief time that I had playing about with it, I thought it slowed down the autofocus just a little bit, so I mentioned it very quickly in that review. But in the weeks after that, when I didn't have the camera, the doubt set in. So I want to put these on here and I want to actually see, does it make it slower or is it the same speed? Okay, so this is with no lens on the front. Okay, and this is with the telephoto lens on the front. Still seems pretty good. Okay, so this is with the wide angle one on, and it's doing some slightly strange stuff to the image. I don't think the wide angle lens is meant to be used like this and zoomed in on, because we are quite heavily zoomed in here. But the autofocus still seems to be pretty good, maybe slightly slower, but still pretty good. Finally, we've come in from outside, out of the direct sunlight, so that we can do a low light test, because this was probably the most asked thing in the comment section on my last video. What's this camera like in low light? So this first test, we've sat Jono in front of the camera, we've turned all the lights out in the showroom apart from one very dim LED in front of him, and then I've simply raised the ISO up from a dark room to a perfectly exposed shot, just to see how it handles low light. And I think it does pretty well. I was quite surprised. There's definitely some areas where the built-in noise reduction is giving you a little bit of softness and mushing the image up a little bit, but I was pretty happy with the noise levels. Okay, so in this next test, what I'm going to do is I'm going to match the exposure between the different gain levels. So what I've done is I've set the zebras on the camera to 70 IRE, and that is going to match the white chair that Jono is sitting on here. So I'm just going to raise the ISO up and then lower the LED, the power of the LED down, so that the chair is exactly at 70% brightness. This should keep an even exposure throughout these shots, and so technically the only thing that should be changing is the ambient light level in the room behind him and the amount of gain in the picture. Okay, so hopefully that answered any questions that you guys had about the XF405 and 400. If I've missed anything though, please do let me know in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to get an answer for you. I really like it. I think it's a really nice little camera. If I had to pick up any fixed lens camcorder out the showroom to go do a shoot with all day, to be honest, this would be fairly high on my list of contenders. It's really small, you're not going to get tired filming with it all day long. It's a really nice size to use in your hands, and I think the images look really good. I think it's a nice camera. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.